Hello, I'm Steven Roy Goodman, host of Higher Education Today, a production of the University of the District of Columbia. Welcome back to the education program that connects you to contemporary issues, people, and institutions involved in the world of higher education. Today, we'll be talking about alumni engagement. Mark Thaden is Executive Director of Alumni Relations at the University of Mary Washington. Previously, Mark served as Assistant Director of Regional Engagement for the University of Virginia. Hardy Vieux is a past president of the Duke University Alumni Association. Hardy is a human rights lawyer who also sits on the Board of Visitors for Duke's Sanford School of Public Policy. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, maybe, Mark, if we could start with you.
Sure.
Would you mind saying a word or two about your job? What does a Director of Alumni Affairs do?
It's a big question. I guess the first thing is normally people have one or two bosses, and I think of myself as having 38,000 bosses, because that's how many alumni we have. And so I'm trying to keep everyone happy and engaged and find a way for them to be involved in the life of the university. So that is through communications and overseeing those communications, our web and social media, our email, as well as on-campus engagement through programming, reunions and homecomings and panels, partnerships with career services, as well as off-campus programming with regional networks, regional alumni networks. So there's a lot of different components to the position. A lot of people think of us as just event planners, and there's a lot more that goes into alumni engagement and alumni relations.
Well, how do you engage alums? So you know, obviously Hardy is from a different university.
Sure.
But let's say Hardy had gone to Mary Washington. How would you want to engage with Hardy?
I think the first thing is almost through a conversation, because knowing what an alumnus is interested in, how they would like to be engaged. Some people want to be engaged just through their educational component, or reading an email, reading their university magazine that comes out a couple times a year. Others want to attend events. They want the social component, or they want the career networking component. So I think that there's a lot of different ways, and no one alumnus is the same as another, and what their interests are and how they would like to be engaged.
Well, and Hardy, how do you like to engage with Duke University?
Personally, on a number of levels. There are continuing education opportunities where we could take courses, be it online or come back to campus. There are alumni trips, there's reunions, and there's homecoming. And then, of course, there are a number of events locally. So whether you're in DC or New York or Durham, North Carolina, the Duke Alumni Association has these various regional operations that you can connect with and do everything from going to a local sports bar to watch the basketball team play, all the way to hearing speakers in your community talk about things like balancing work and life, or talking about upcoming elections. So there's a number of offerings out there, because we recognize that different alums at different points in their lives want different things. And so we're trying to offer a little bit of everything for those alums, and they could pick and choose what works for them, and depending on where they live and where they are in that point in their life.
And so what you're saying, and I think this makes sense, is that at different stages of one's life in terms of age, you might be interested in a baseball game versus getting a job versus going to an art museum.
Exactly, Steve. I think if you're a recent alum, and maybe if you're coming out of graduate school, your focus is on your career. How do I get that job? What sort of mentoring can I get? What pitfalls do I need to be aware of? If you're in your 40s or 50s, maybe your concern is your family, that you have small children. How do I go about balancing work and life issues? If you're older, let's say you're in your 60s and 70s and you're an empty nester, your issue might be, well, I want to do more in continuing education. I want to go on a cruise in the Mediterranean and learn more about the culture and the people. So we need to be sensitive to that as an alumni association and not treat it as a one-size-fits-all.
Well, maybe in terms of jobs, if we can talk about that for a second, because a lot of people who are watching this are moms and dads whose kids may be looking at a school like Duke or Mary Washington or other universities, and they're maybe wondering, well, what kind of job am I going to get when Johnny or Sally leaves the university? How does the Alumni Association help in terms of job placement and job searching?
Sure, I'll start on that one. There's the Alumni Association partners with the Office of Career and Academic Services at Mary Washington to provide panel events, networking. We actually will do training sessions for the students on speed networking, similar to speed dating, and as well as bring alumni back to discuss their careers, discuss what they do. We are a liberal arts institution, so a lot of the students as they're coming in, they don't know exactly where they're planning to land, and so it gives them an opportunity to learn from the alumni and see where exactly, what interests they may have and careers they might pursue, and alumni are the best resource to do that. And a lot of the alumni then connect back through internships, entry-level positions. We recently just had, through a reunion connection, one of the students that had just graduated volunteered for a reunion weekend and helping out, connected with an alum, and that was her first job right out. You know, they had an instant connection, and now she's working at that law firm. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for the alumni to get involved through those career networks.
And for us, it's as a priority as well. I think it's important to be able to leverage the resources of our alumni base. We have 140,000 alums domestically and internationally, and all of these women and men are talented in their own right and have traveled very different paths. And we put a premium on bringing those individuals back to campus and connecting them with students, whether it is at a career fair or locally, where if we have students in DC for the summer, then we'll have brown bag lunches at different venues so that the students can go over, say, to the CIA and learn about what it means to be a part of the intelligence community. You'll go to a law firm and understand what does it mean to practice at a private law firm. So those are really important touch points for us, and those are the kind of relationships we foster. And I think we go one step further. We put a premium on also bringing alums into the classroom. So we have a number of programs where we will leverage, let's say, someone who's in private equity banking in New York City, we'll bring her to campus to speak to our students. And also we have things like the Duke Reader program, where we have our alums, they will read papers from a student who's opted into this program and say, okay, I'm a organic chemist, I work for an oil company, and I've read your paper about the environmental impact of the oil spill in the Gulf. And I want to give you some thoughts on that. And then the student can incorporate some of those thoughts and have a much better understanding of what it means to write in the professional environment, because that's slightly different from just writing in the academic setting.
So students are engaged, but what about the people who are only a little engaged? So Johnny or Sally had an okay experience at the University of X or Y. How do you engage them later on in life, or is that possible?
I think it is definitely possible to engage someone that had maybe a mediocre experience, and that's finding what experiences they had that they did really value, whether it was one organization or club, some sort of student activity, whether they had an affinity with athletics. There's a lot of different ways. Maybe it was just their residence hall and the experiences that they had there. And one thing that always ties all of the alums together is the value of that degree that they received, their educational experience. And so maybe that one student that really didn't get involved, they didn't have a great experience, they didn't meet a lot of people, they did go to class, they did interact with those professors and have those really strong relationships. And so we capitalize on that through the continuing education opportunities and other opportunities to tie them in with that and make sure that they know that they, even though they may not have had either the social experience that they wanted, that they still, that value of that diploma that they received will carry through.
And what about a student who went to multiple universities? Then aren't you essentially competing against other universities? Like Hardy, you're a lawyer, so you went to a law school besides your undergrad. Are you engaged with your law school, and or why are you more engaged with Duke than your law school, or vice versa?
I'm certainly engaged with my law school as well. I'm just engaged differently. I mean, there is, I think, a stronger affinity for me personally to my undergraduate institution because they were my formative years. And I think a lot of our anecdotal experiences bear that out, that most of us sort of gravitate to that place we went to at 17 or 18 years old and was home for us, at least was our first home. Whereas when we got to graduate or professional schools, we were a little bit older, a little bit more sophisticated, if you will. So for me, participating in programs or being there for both of my universities, there's no clash at all. They're both home, just in a very different way. And what I really enjoy about being a Duke alum is that for those of us who are not as engaged, the starting place for us is to have an honest, candid conversation about why is that. And so I think we're willing to sort of pull the curtains and say, it wasn't all perfect for everyone, and it can't be. So let's have a discussion about what was wrong and what can we do going forward to address that. And a case in point is last year Duke commemorated the 50th anniversary of the integration of the university. And our president got up in front of a room full of alums and made the point that we wished we were celebrating something beyond 50, that it was 75 or 100 years old. And that's a starting place for us, not an ending place. But having that sort of honest conversation allows us to address some of those challenges and recognize that they are also opportunities.
But couldn't you also be involved in other entities, like a church or a community group? So you're choosing as a volunteer to be involved in Duke University, perhaps at the expense of some of those other groups.
Absolutely, and for me, the calculus is based on the importance of higher education for me. Coming from New York City, where I was in a pretty urban neighborhood and not many people had opportunities to go onto institutions of higher learning, I look back and recognize the value of the degree of a higher learning degree. So whether it's Mary Washington or Duke, I think a lot of us recognize that university and that degree has done quite a bit for us. So in that sense, it resonates for me. It resonates very keenly on the professional front. Unlike the way a church could or some other civic obligation, the university reminds me that a lot of my professional growth and achievements are very much connected to that university and that network. That network is incredibly valuable, leveraging my friends and peers to say, I'm thinking about making this pivot. How can you advise me? Or I have a challenge here. You've done it. Can you give me some guidance? That's uniquely the province of a university in many ways.
Well, maybe if we can take that pivoting. So let's assume that I'm an alum and I graduated from a university 10 years ago and I don't love my job and I want to have a new job. How would I engage with the Alumni Association to learn about what other alums are doing and then start my job search?
I think they can go about that a few different ways. First, they can get involved regionally if there's that regional network or club. That's the first way, because they can tie in with other alumni in various fields in their own city and start that networking process. They're also able to connect. At Mary Washington, we have career services for life. That's something that we say that as they graduate, they're going to need career advice and assistance throughout their lives, and so they can always come back and we'll help them in any way we can with that. And so I think that there's a way that they can connect and kind of explore, and a lot of them, they can reach out to the department chairs of their major and say, hey, what other alums, these faculty are a wonderful resource, and they really have a strong bond with their students and the alumni, and they're able to do a lot of the connections directly as well.
Yes, but let's say it's 10 or 15 years later and
Sure.
you didn't know Professor Jones or Smith. How are you going to do that?
Right, and a lot of our alums will reach out to the Alumni Association and say, I'm looking for a new career opportunity. We'll connect them with the Career Services Office, and we'll actually start the introductions with other alumni through our Alumni Board, Alumni Association Board, or through the departments themselves, and say, there's some interest in this field. If they're saying, I'd like to change my career direction, which way I would like to look into law, and then we can actually connect them with people in that and faculty to start exploring that.
And Hardy, do you agree with this?
Most certainly. I think one of the initial starting places is using online resources. I mean, that's a great way to sort of narrow down searches and identify people, individuals. But ultimately, there has to be an understanding, a belief that it's important to give back. And I know that is very much true at Duke. Case in point, over the summer, I received an email from a young woman who had been out of Duke for a couple of years, had worked at a legal services organization in New York, and was asking herself the question of, do I still want to be a lawyer? Because she was disenchanted with the experience. So out of the blue, she sent me an email. And I responded because I understood that was part of being a member of the Duke family, as I'm sure it is the same at Mary Washington, that I had benefited in a similar manner, and not years ago, but literally this year, where I, at 42 years old, did a career pivot from being a trial lawyer to being a human rights lawyer. And so it was through Duke that I put out the word to my friends and classmates that I'm looking to do something different. And many of them sat down with me and advised me, and ultimately it was through Duke's public policy school that I secured a fellowship to go work with Syrian refugee children in the Middle East, in Amman, Jordan. And so it was using that network and and the resources that Duke made available to me, that when I came back home, I had a soft landing, and now I'm the legal director of Human Rights First. But my pivot is no different from that 26-year-old woman. Maybe we have some nuances that are different, but ultimately, to make it happen, you need those who have gone before you to sort of lean back and give you some guidance and help point you to the right direction and say, you also need to speak to so-and-so.
And how does this work internationally? So how do the two alumni networks that you represent work overseas?
We have a small number of alumni that live overseas, and we actually connect them very specifically with admissions. Our admissions office, we ask for their involvement as a resource in recruiting others so that we can have more of an international presence. Whenever we have faculty that go abroad to speak at conferences, or we'll connect them with a local alumni. And then we also do have trips, a couple times a year, alumni travel trips, where we'll send a faculty member along with alums that register to various areas, and it's an educational and a cultural trip, and that is all over the world. Mediterranean cruises, as you had mentioned, as well as Baltic cruises and exploring the Swiss Alps, Italian lakes.
And for us, it's not that much different. I think our main model is leveraging the Duke regional operations, and so we have those overseas as well. And so that when you enter a new community, that there are a network of people who have been living in the Middle East for some time or in Europe and are ready to welcome you and give you some guidance on things you should be mindful of. But that network is there, and you're able to access it, and as I did in the Middle East. And those travel components, having been on a number of those trips, I can tell you they are wonderful resources. I took a Duke trip to China, and the alums in Beijing had dinner with us, and I still stay in touch with some of those alums. And so we're very intentional about it, and I think that's the key focus is you can't always just let it happen, that you have to seek to make those connections.
Well, and speaking of the connections, Mark, I think this may be geared to you, but do you track alums in terms of a software or some way of saying, well, wow, how do we know what each alum is really doing or what they're engaged in?
Oh, it's always the challenge is good data. We track our alumni. Once they graduate, they move over to from the student records to the alumni records. We do our best to keep those records updated, and some of that is on the alums to keep us updated with what their current positions are, their contact information, and we do kind of keep that connection there.
And how does Duke do that?
Duke sends the message early on as a freshman that you're already part of the Duke family. And so from the first week that you walk in, the Alumni Association sponsors a picnic, and there are alums in attendance, all the way through upon graduation, where we have a send-off picnic as well. And so we constantly are reminding our students that they are part of this Duke family, and there are benefits that come with that, and also there are some obligations. We even go so far as to send certificates to children who've been born to alums and say, welcome to the world, and we welcome you to the class of 2038 or what have you. So we do try to make the message or send the message that we're here and that we're touch points for you. So when our students graduate, one of the first things that we do is we say, okay, you're heading to New York, and here's the community that you can connect with. Here's some names and here's some phone numbers. So we constantly try to facilitate those interactions, and we do it sometimes in small ways, like I said, we have these send-off parties where we have high school students who are about to come to Duke. So we have the local alums, young as well as older alums, come and greet those students and say, when you go to campus, if you ever need us, we're here, and we're also from Potomac, Maryland, or from Oakland, California, so we're a resource for you. So again, it's part of that consistent, intentional messaging that we work on.
And if I can add a little to that, we did just start something very similar, adding a certificate in with their diplomas that they receive at graduation, welcoming them to the Alumni Association, to bridge that gap and make sure that they are aware of what the Alumni Association does for them, that there are alumni benefits throughout. And then as alumni, they attend events, and we do track that so that we can kind of keep them engaged, know who's attending these events, and kind of keeping those statistics and those metrics.
Well, all of this costs a lot of money, I assume. So are you always looking at, well, can an alum give a big donation, or can they do a small donation? How do you track that or think about that?
Well, I think the donation component is important because alumni engagement leads to giving. There's giving of time, talent, and treasure. You hear that very frequently in the alumni relations profession. And some people are able to give their time and their talents, and sometimes they're able to give their treasure or donations. Alumni engagement universities are ranked based on alumni participation and giving. And without a strong alumni program and that constant involvement, you're probably not going to see that high level of participation in your alumni giving. Our Alumni Association is funded several different ways, and we do a lot of events where we do have some sort of charge that goes with it to help offset the costs, but we know that there's an investment that is there in alumni relations that's by far worth it.
And as a private university, we rely quite heavily on the generosity of our alums. And that starts, as we've heard, it starts with engagement, that our alums need to come to campus. They need to connect with Duke, whether they're 5 years out or 25 years out, to better understand how the university is changing in a changing environment. What does it mean to put into action the principles that we always talk about in our Duke magazine or in emails or in lectures? And for us, that means service learning. We talk about knowledge in the service of society. And so that's a great tagline until you come to campus. And you can see that there are students who are participating in summer immersive programs like Duke Engage, where they fashion their own curriculums, then go overseas, and they put that curriculum into play. And that's supported by the generosity of alums. We pick up the tab for the whole thing, and when alums, I think, see that sort of engagement, I think it gets them excited. I mean, they want in. And so whether it's with their $5 contribution, $5,000 or $5 million, we say, there's a culture of giving, and we've all benefited from it, and we need your support, and particularly with financial aid. That has always been a place where Duke alums tend to be particularly generous, but because we recognize that for our model of education to be successful, that is sort of high touch, high interaction, high engagement, that we need the resources to do it, and we want to be able to keep the doors wide open to young men and women from all over the world. And to do that, we need the support of our alums who are able to do that. And bringing them back to campus, getting them involved locally so that they can see, feel, and touch Duke, that does it.
That's interesting. If we can look at this from a national perspective, there must be an association that handles some of these issues. Are you involved in an association like that?
Yes, it's CASE is the acronym, but Council for the Advancement and Support of Education. And that's actually divided into various districts, both nationally and internationally. And they have conferences, and it focuses on alumni relations, advancement services, the fundraising side, and it's an educational tool. It's a professional development for alumni relations professionals and advancement professionals, and it is a fantastic resource. And by dividing it into those districts, you get a little bit more personal attention or connection with institutions that are in your region, so with those conferences, so that you're able to even build your skills and troubleshoot issues together.
So you might decide, for instance, if you wanted to work at a different university 10 years down the road, you might meet somebody at a CASE conference.
Oh, definitely. The connections you make with colleagues at other institutions is invaluable for professional development in this field.
And Hardy, you're also a board member for a school at Duke.
I am. I'm a member of our public policy school's board of visitors, and that public policy school is called the Sanford School. That board of visitors is sort of an outside consulting body that we are able to spend time with our faculty and our dean and give them guidance and give them perspective from our real world public policy perches, and sort of identify opportunities so that we're not reactive, but that we're thinking proactively about opportunities. So that's one way for our alums to reconnect through those boards of visitors. I've also had the pleasure of being on Duke's Board of Trustees, which again is, for me, another meaningful touch point. And that's a fiduciary board, so our responsibility is somewhat different, but ultimately it still comes back to ways to engage and help with the direction of the university. And the university is constantly in a dialogue about things like we are looking for a new provost, and what do alums want to see in that new role? And that kind of input is funneled through these boards and given to our senior administration, and then we hold them accountable. And so we think that's part of the pact that we make, that we'll be there for the university, and we expect the university to engage us and be transparent with us.
Well, fair enough. We only have another minute or two left, so maybe if I could throw this out to both of you, any last minute tips that you have for either alums from either of your institutions or people thinking about entering the field and or somebody thinking about going to a university in terms of what they would get from the Alumni Association?
Well, I think that my greatest piece of advice for anyone that's interested in getting into the field is to be an active listener to many of the ideas or the programs and things that I put into place in our institution are directly from the mouths of the alumni. And so having those conversations, hearing what they want and being able to implement those ideas and connect them in any way they'd like to be connected with the university so that they feel just as involved as they did when they were on campus, I think is very important. And anyone that's interested in being involved in alumni relations, it's such a people-oriented field. It is, you get to really connect them and make them feel a part of something. So it's almost like a family, and it's a wonderful place to be.
I think as far as a student thinking about the university, I think we need to just pay attention to the modeling that goes on. How do we treat one another as alums? How do we treat those who might be coming to the university? And having an opportunity to sit down and witnessing that modeling. So what I mean by that is, in my instance, I went to Duke as a prospective freshman and showed up on campus one day unannounced and literally found a student who had called me about a week or two before and said, "Hi, I'm David, you should come to Duke." I found this young man, David, and said, "I'm here on campus." And I didn't know what the protocol was, and I showed up, didn't tell you, didn't call you, and I'm here now. And he says, "Well, you didn't do it in sort of the traditional way, but I'll take care of you." So for that weekend, I was like his brother. And by the time I left Duke, and having been chaperoned by him to his classes, met his friends, slept in his dorm room, albeit on the floor, by the time I got on that plane heading back home to New York City, I thought, if this is how David and Duke students treat someone who's not in the family, I can only wonder what they would do if I was in the family.
Well, that's a great way to end this segment. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you would like additional information about Mark Thaden or Hardy Vieux, please visit alumni.umw.edu or dukealumni.com. If you have comments or suggestions about higher education today, please send an email to our viewer mailbox at highereducationtoday@topcolleges.com. Thank you for watching. We will continue to bring you quality discussions about important matters in today's college and university world. Please join me again for another edition of Higher Education Today. I'm Steven Roy Goodman, and you've been watching Higher Education Today.